Democrats were rightfully mocked for holding pathetic little signs, storming out like children having a tantrum, and scrolling on their phones while President Donald Trump introduced and honored the parents of fallen soldiers, victims of illegal immigrant violence, and a bullied 13-year-old cancer survivor during his recent address to Congress. But the most interesting event occurred right at the beginning, and it had an incredibly historical ring to it, one that might indicate the final breath of the Democratic Party. Rosie the Riveter here, dropping more truth bombs to destroy fake news and propaganda. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell to get new videos when they are uploaded. Now, let's get into today's riveting topic. About 24 hours before Trump's address to Congress on March 4th, reports started circulating that Democrats were planning different methods of disruption, including holding signs, waving egg cartons, walking out in a huff, and throwing constitutions at the president. Some women showed up in bright pink dresses to express their support for women. However, I think they would have made a bigger impact if they would have voted literally the day before to protect women in sports and locker rooms instead of standing with men pretending to be women. But what do you expect from people who can't even define what a woman is? But this is what Democrats do. They wave Ukrainian flags on the floor of the House after voting to send them our hard-earned money. They wear white in solidarity of women's suffrage in 2019, which reminds me of what they donned at the 1924 Democratic National Convention at New York's Madison Square Garden. At least this time, we were pretty confident the speaker wouldn't childishly and disrespectfully tear up Trump's speech when he was done. In fact, Speaker Johnson's response to Representative Al Green's disruption was not only warranted, every bang of his gavel was one more death knell for the Democratic Party. But we have seen all of this before. It's what actually led to the formation of the Democratic Party in 1828. However, now they are on the other side, and it's leading to their demise. By the 1824 presidential elections, the political scene was dominated by the Democratic-Republican Party, of which all four presidential candidates were members: John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, William Harris Crawford, and Henry Clay, with Jackson being the only outsider of the current Monroe administration. However, there were many fractions within the party, equated to our current day one-party deep state with members from both Democrats and Republicans. No one candidate received the minimum required amount of electoral college votes to assume the presidency, though Jackson had the most overall. The popular vote count was irrelevant, as the founders intended, since electors, not candidates, were voted on by the citizens, and the electors in Delaware, Georgia, Louisiana, New York, South Carolina, and Vermont were chosen directly by the state legislatures without any direct voter input at all. Therefore, per the 12th Amendment, the election was sent to the House of Representatives for a resolution. Even though Henry Clay was not among the top three candidates under the House's consideration, he was the Speaker at the time, giving him extreme influence over the outcome of the election. Once Adams was declared the winner, accusations of backroom deals and appearances of favoritism by Clay led many Jackson supporters to claim election stealing. Allegations of a corrupt bargain surfaced as Clay was soon appointed Adams as Secretary of State. When Jackson ran again against Adams 4 years later, he did it under a new political banner called the Democratic Party, the current party we know today, led by Jackson and Martin Van Buren and populated by disgruntled Jacksonians. Jackson opponents characterized him as stubborn and stupid, calling him a jackass. A man of the people, Jackson embraced the insult, placing a donkey on his political posters and promoting the animal's characteristics of steadfastness, endurance, and its ability to carry heavy loads. Remember when Hillary Clinton called Trump supporters a basket of deplorables and they embraced her insult? How about when Joe Biden said Trump supporters were garbage and Trump responded by arriving at the rally in a garbage truck. The people responded to such insults in 1828, just like they did in 2016 and 2024. They overwhelmingly voted for Jackson for president. The remaining Democratic Republicans rebranded as the National Republican Party under the leadership of Adams and Clay. After Clay's failed run against Jackson in 1832, though, Jackson's critics started accusing the father of the Democratic Party of being a king, influenced by the British Whig Party, who resisted overreach by the monarchy. The National Republican Party adopted the Whig name as a statement against Jackson. What's interesting is the many similarities between then and now. At the time, there was basically a one-party system. Democratic Republicans then, deep state now. Both Jackson and Trump were outsider disruptors and considered the president of the people. House speakers interfered in elections. Henry Clay's corrupt bargain, and then check out my video laying out Nancy Pelosi's involvement on January 6th for all that information. Both Jackson and Trump embraced and used insults to their advantage. Both Jackson and Trump were called king by the opposition, and days after, Trump hilariously trolled them by tweeting, "Long live the king," sending the deep state into a meltdown. Because of the attacks from the ruling class, the Democratic Party emerged as a political force. It almost feels like we're seeing MAGA do the same thing, don't you think? Regardless of his David versus Goliath rise to power, Andrew Jackson subscribed to an ideology that set him down the wrong track and has plagued the Democratic Party ever since. Jackson rejected following divine providence, of which George Washington and the founders submitted to, believing God blesses our country because we are on his side. Instead, acting under the manifest destiny, Jackson believed God blesses us because he is on our side. This is why Jackson had no issue pushing native tribes further west to less desirable lands instead of living with them as neighbors. Don't forget, it was Jackson's racist policies that led to the Trail of Tears, which he justified under manifest destiny. It's kind of the same mindset of Washington elitists today. In my opinion, I believe Trump is trying to get us back to divine providence. And those who don't want to be guided by a power other than their own self-serving conscience are losing their minds. So where did it lead the Democratic Party? We all know slavery was a divisive issue from the start of our country, especially as states started abolishing slavery following the American Revolution. Finally, under our own rule, the founders tried to start eliminating slavery when they obtained the Northwest Territory. Ordinances were adopted for the area, with the last one in 1787, including Thomas Jefferson's declaration that any state formed in the territory would be a free state. However, when Jefferson brokered the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, no such ordinances were made. Again, bringing slavery in new states to the forefront, as free and slave states both wanted to ensure balance in Congress. In efforts to settle growing tensions, Congress passed the Missouri Compromise of 1820. This extended out the natural barrier of the Ohio River established in the Northwest Territory as an invisible line between free and slave states along the 30-60-30 latitude, outlawing slavery above it, except for Missouri itself, and allowing slavery below it. By 1854, 15 states in the North and Midwest were free, with 15 Southern states still supporting slavery. The Missouri Compromise kept things somewhat in check until Southern Whigs joined Democrats from both free and slave states, selling out their constituents again to accept the Kansas-Missouri Act of 1854. This act allowed newly developing Western states to determine their free or slave status on their own, regardless of location, basically nullifying the Missouri Compromise. Many members within the Whig Party, as well as those in other smaller parties, and even some Democrats, incensed by the inaction and hostility against freedoms and liberties for all people in America, established the Republican Party on March 20, 1854. Under the direction of Senator Charles Sumner, the newly formed party had one specific purpose: abolishing slavery. After the Kansas-Nebraska Act officially became law 2 months later, free and slave state advocates flooded Kansas, which resulted in an actual bloodbath. Citizens literally massacred each other over slavery. In 1856, Sumner took to the Senate floor and gave a speech against the authors of the Kansas-Missouri Act. It was a devastating speech. Representative Preston Brooks, a relative of one of the authors, took umbrage and decided to also take action. He marched into the Senate chamber, raised his cane, and proceeded to beat Sumner within an inch of his life. If Sumner had not found refuge under his desk, Brooks would have without a doubt killed the man. He was striking his cane so hard against Sumner's head, it shattered into pieces. Despite Republicans having a majority in the House, Brooks freely walked out of the chamber without a hint of resistance. Northern publications expressed their disgust. The Cincinnati Gazette said, "The South cannot tolerate free speech anywhere, and would stifle it in Washington with the bludgeon and the bowie knife, as they are now trying to stifle it in Kansas by massacre, rapine, and murder." William Cullen Bryant of the New York Evening Post asked, "Has it come to this, that we must speak with bated breath in the presence of our Southern masters? Are we to be chastised as they chastise their slaves? Are we too slaves, slaves for life, a target for their brutal blows when we do not comport ourselves to please them?" Southern newspapers, on the other hand, were full of pride over Brooks as he was praised as a hero. The Richmond Enquirer editorialized that Sumner should be caned every morning, praising the attack as good in conception, better in execution, and best of all in consequences, and denounced these vulgar abolitionists in the Senate, who have been suffered to run too long without collars. They must be lashed into submission. Southerners sent Brooks hundreds of new canes in endorsement of his assault. One was inscribed, "Hit him again." Can you believe some actually fashioned rings from the cane fragments which were worn in solidarity with the attempted murderer? The more things change, the more they stay the same. Remember, they blamed Lincoln for the Civil War, the violence, and his own assassination. They blamed Trump for his too. As abolitionists coalesced within the Republican Party, Supreme Court Chief Justice Roger Taney politicized the 1857 Dred Scott case to try to shut down the slavery issue once and for all. Abusing his position to unconstitutionally cement slavery in all states forever, Taney used his decision to go beyond the scope of the case and not only determine that slaves were property and slave owners can take them anywhere, including free states, he declared Africans would never be citizens of the United States. Americans responded by electing Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president. Slave states immediately withdrew from the Union under cries of losing their freedoms, forcing Lincoln to take action to hold the Union together, resulting in the outlawing of slavery once and for all. Taney served in several key positions in the Jackson administration before being nominated by Jackson in 1836. He was no different than the activist judges appointed by today's Democrats who are trying to block Trump's constitutional authority today as it disrupts their agenda. Now do you understand why Biden and the Democrats wanted to pack the court? So when Al Green stood on the House floor, waving his cane in anger and defiance, all I could see was another Charles Sumner moment. The House at least took action this time, censoring Green, but just like in 1856, Democrats surrounded Green in support. But even that was met with possible consequences, not only for the Democrats who participated, but for the party itself. As with the Whigs, Democrat voters, tired of the radicalism over the past decade, have joined the Republican Party in droves, and these recent shenanigans are pushing even more to the right. The Democratic Party has always praised disruption and violence, as we continue to see calls for it today against Trump, Elon Musk, Tesla, and MAGA. While legacy media is not outright saying they support the attacks, their articles and commentaries infer these agitators are justified as the response to Trump's and Musk's political actions. They do fall short of condoning the violence, but what's more telling is they also fail to really condemn it. Think about it. How much did they really care about Trump's assassination attempts? Many on the left actually took to social media to lament neither one successfully completed the task. Some are still begging for someone to try again. While no politician, celebrity, or media figure outright praised Trump's attempted assassins like they did Brooks, it was dropped from the news cycle as quickly as possible, with no journalistic curiosity about the facts and evidence in the case. Let me ask you this. Do you honestly think Congress didn't know Bleeding Kansas would happen when they passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act? Do you really believe Congress didn't know advocates would riot as they lamented Trayvon Martin, supported Michael Brown and Ferguson, and took a knee for George Floyd while demeaning cops, white people, and MAGA, and law and order as well? How about their pro-Palestinian support versus all their anti-Trump, Musk, and MAGA rhetoric? Democrats in Congress viciously attacked Musk for finding fraud, and now Tesla cars and businesses are being vandalized, shot at, and set on fire. Activists even swarmed Trump Tower the other day. This is nothing short of domestic terrorism. God bless you if you still think this is all organic and the activists posing as elected officials aren't purposely pushing the American people into another civil war. But Jackson's overt racism, love of slavery, and use of violence, which lives in the Democratic Party DNA, is just part of the story. As I wrote in my 2016 Liberating letter, Satan's Manifest Destiny, Jackson used his government position to obtain the most valuable Western land for him and his friends. In an insider trading scheme, Jackson secretly sent his surveyor real estate friends into the West while the Native Americans were occupying it. After forcing the tribes out, they obtained the land for minimal cost. They then turned around and made fortunes by selling it for huge profits. Jackson used his portion to buy a plantation and over 100 slaves, which allowed him to prosper even more. He entered the White House virtually broke and left with the equivalent of $100 million today. There are some discrepancies as to Jackson's actual calculated wealth, but it is indisputable he made lots of money using his position and power, a tactic several of our recent Democrat presidents have perfected with unimaginable results. Do you really think Musk's exposure of USAID and NGO fraud and money laundering is new? Democrats have been amusing and committing such fraud since its inception. Now is it clear as to why they are attacking him instead of denying his findings? If you can't dispute the evidence, destroy the messenger. The only thing that Jackson did that Americans can definitely applaud was getting rid of the central bank. On that, he was 100% correct. However, progressive Democrat President Woodrow Wilson eventually succeeded in enslaving the American people to the Federal Reserve in 1913. Once a party of slavery, always a party of slavery. The Democratic Party is going the way of the Whigs, as I believe they have finally played their final card. Unfortunately for them, it turns out it was a joker. I'm Rosie the Riveter, and that's my 2 cents. But what do you think? Leave your comments down below. And if you enjoy my content, please consider supporting my work on Patreon. You can find all my videos and my blog, Liberating Letters, at thefactspaper.com. You can also start your own research on the Facts Paper by exploring the thousands of links to articles I have, including those noted in my videos. Sharing the truth fake news propagandists won't. Investigate and discover the truth for yourself.